everybody in. It's another Nice Job live chat. It's Thursday. It's 2021. Season 2 continues on. I have an extra special guest here today to talk about culture. Yes, I wanted to start off the first episode here in 2021 about culture because sometimes the beginning of the year is when you start thinking about making big changes. You think about, you're setting your goals, you're thinking about how you want to execute things. But for some of you, your goal for 2021 is to be bigger, larger, expand, growth, whatever word you want to use by the end of 2021. And your culture is going to have to evolve several times along that journey. But don't take it from me because I actually found an expert to help me out. A good buddy of mine, Nat Measley, joins us from yourculturedesign.com. Nat, how are you this evening, this afternoon? You're on the East, so this evening. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I'm over here on the East Coast, doing well. It's January, so it's cold where I am, just outside of Philadelphia, but looking forward to our conversation and to a different working world in 2021. It's going to be different no matter what we try to do.
Yeah, right off the top, 2020 posed a lot of different challenges for entrepreneurs and businesses of all sizes. You saw the workplace fully change for those that maybe had office and in-person facilities. A lot of them had to go full remote. For a lot of our audience, home service professionals, different safety protocols that flood it to the top of the list or rocket it to the top of the list for a lot of their consumers. We saw a huge influx into the digital landscape. So advertising, marketing, social media, all of that had to go through its own little bit of change and evolution. And through all that, as I mentioned at the very top, culture, company dynamics, all of that shifted and ebbed and flowed and kind of became a new animal on its own. But before we dive into that, I think it's good to kind of go back and talk about you specifically. What got you in that led you to be like the founder of Your Culture Design? What about either dynamics of culture or just human interaction? What was the first time that you knew, hey, this is something I'm definitely interested in? And what led to, now you're both academic and professional pursuit of culture study and really, workplace dynamics?
I am the son of two teachers. And so I grew up in class 24 hours a day, which actually means that I liked learning and I liked studying. Enough so that I went off and went, was lucky enough to go to college, lucky enough to get a graduate degree in organizational leadership and culture, and then spent close to 12 years working with a company consulting with others about how to include fun into their cultures, and then kind of boomeranged back to academia to teach entrepreneurs, small business owners, and others about the importance of looking at culture as a design problem and challenge. So since the end of 2017, early 2018, that's what we've been working on. And I'd been working on the problem myself as I call myself kind of a practitioner, but also an academic, in looking at this issue of, people in the workplace. At what point should we care about our people? And if we do, what should we do? And how do we include their voice in whatever the thing is that we're going to do? And then also, is there a way to point it back to some realized gain for the company? And that's a big challenge that I don't know if anybody's really solved it yet, but it's fun to work on.
And I want to dive in particular right off the bat with one thing you said. You talked about when is it time to care about your people? And that as a headline might seem a little like, wait a minute, I would always care about my people. Yeah. Could you define that a bit more and get into what exactly that means and, maybe a little high level of what a timeline could look like?
Yeah, I think the question is, as someone carrying the banner of culture within your organization, whatever that organization may be, a nonprofit, a corporate company, right, out for the mighty dollar, a small business growing, a family-owned enterprise, it doesn't matter as long as that person who's carrying the banner of culture is intentional about it. So caring about your people really just means you're thinking about all the parts and pieces of your business, including the way that you communicate, the way that you lead. I mean, there's millions of factors, right, that affect the way that we come together as people. It rings true the same in the work world, just kind of adding a layer of complexity to it when you talk about culture and then at the job, right? Anyone that's, when I say when and should you care about your people, I've always kind of been a humanitarian, in the way that I've approached helping other businesses. But anyone that's carrying that banner, if they're intentional and they're at least thinking about what they're doing, whether it's the actual business they're running, the job function of their employees, or something they're trying for, professional development or personal development, as long as they're thinking about what the effects are, that's what I'm talking about.
Makes sense. Now, a big thing when it comes to growing a business is implementing, strategies or systems or things that are, testable, repeatable, and ultimately can transfer as you grow. A big thing that I've noticed is when you start to systemize culture, it creates this weird conflict of when new people join the environment, should the culture evolve, change, or do we just measure the new person in this ecosystem against that dynamic? And it's always definitely been a push and pull. Anyone joining any new group, whether it's the jealous big brother, new baby in town, to if a company is if you're acquired or bought, something like that, new blood above, new blood below. There's always that weird sort of meshing, but that dynamic of, okay, we want these systemized processes to help us grow. But as we grow, this one ecosystem is going to have so many new factors. How do you find what parts of culture to systemize? Or are there parts that you can, or is culture something that just can't be systemized?
Yeah, I don't know. And I think that's a fair question. And I don't know, because I think every place, every group is different, right? Like you said, the big brother, whether it's actual biological brother or big brother corporate who came in and bought our company, or acquisitions and mergers. I don't know. The thing that we really test and that I've seen to work when implemented, again, is intentional, is the system you can use and leverage is design thinking. That's what we try to teach people. So design thinking is a process, right? You identify the problem, you bring the users together to help you solve that problem, and then you implement change. And then you fail brilliantly, which is perfect. Design thinking is about iterating and making mistakes so you can go back and try it again. The end result of design thinking is something you may never achieve. Just like that, I don't know what kind of picture we're trying to paint tonight here of what's the perfect culture, right? It will never exist. But as long as you're practicing those principles of, identifying the users, listening to them, implementing the things they've said, and then trying them and seeing what worked and what didn't work. So it becomes this kind of iterative process. If you can do that every second of the day, good on you. If you can do it, I don't know, once every other week, cool. If you can do it once a year at an annual retreat, the big piece that we try to educate leaders on who are asking that same question you just asked, right? What's the system? Is this a simple start to that system is just listen to what people are telling you. They'll tell you.
So I guess almost in some ways, there's not like a cookie cutter sort of transformative process out there that's going to give you the exact culture you're looking for, because there's so many different elements at play, including, for a lot of our audience that are service professionals. There was a lot of challenges in 2020 that came their way, more so than just trying to find more leads and sales. For a lot of them, it was just staying afloat and trying to, in some instances, keep relationships, because you might have to have laid someone off, or someone's job might have had to change. They're not kind of doing exactly what they love to do, but in order to keep them on payroll, that's the pivot they had to make. But what's interesting to talk about design thinking is, the listening to the users part.
Mm-hmm.
In a smaller organization, or maybe I'm wrong, let me ask it this way. Do you think that's easier in a smaller organization where there's kind of less voices to listen to? Or perhaps as you start to grow, then that small voice, as more kind of go in, you could end up with an us and them situation. The new crew and the old crew.
Yeah.
How do you start? How do you start? I guess with design thinking, with getting users to feel a part of the process, perhaps without making it like the Wild West, because, hey, what do you do? What do you want? Like, well, I could use a car. Like, all right, well, we can't do a car. Like, oh,
Right.
well, you're not taking me seriously. How do you start that feedback?
Yeah. Well, to answer your first question, there is research out there that supports that cultures can be as small as 12 people. So if you have a company of 120 people, there's a chance you have at least, or this is just, if you really put everyone on a matrix, there's probably thousands of outcomes, but at least you have 10 different cultures in that organization, right? At a company with 120 people. So to answer your question, of course it's easier, right? With 4 people, maybe I have a front office person and I have 2 techs, whoever they may be, who are out on the road all day. And then I have another staff member doing whatever, I don't know, marketing. Okay. It's easier to check in, right? And it is easier to do that every day. As I grow my organization or my company, the neat thing about this kind of design thinking process is there's nothing stopping you. This is kind of basic leadership of encouraging and engaging then that next generation to do the same thing for their people as well. So when I get to 120 people, my 5-person firm has grown, which is great. I now have 3 marketing people and a whole HR team and lots of techs out on the road any given day. The hope is I've now trained everyone on my staff about how to listen to each other and what the problems are. I don't think there's anything wrong with everyone asking for a car. To me, that shows people are willing to go through the process and at least open up. Like we were talking just earlier before we got on live about, the guy that in the morning he might show up to work. He doesn't want to, no fluff, no supplemental stuff, right? No, don't say hi to me. Let me get in my truck. Let me go do my job. Let that person gripe to you whenever they want and listen to their gripes as a design challenge, because he might say something that becomes his idea that allows him to make 2 more visits that every day. Suddenly, as a business owner, I should really be listening. That's culture, right? It has nothing to do with something that's impossible to design or build. Let him gripe if that works for him.
And that individual might also have a barrier of maybe not as extroverted, maybe not as kind of forthcoming. I would love for you to explore a bit, or I would love to get your opinion on forceful culture, and that sort of deal, because sometimes I go back to that sort of conflict that can happen is we have a culture, this is what we're about. These are our core values. We have them up on the wall. We have them constantly on the TV. And if you don't, display all those all the time, well, then you should be out. That sort of mindset is it can be a good evaluative sort of process. But there's also a little bit of a danger in there. Is there something you could do from a design thinking sort of mindset to kind of have these safeguards from becoming not open enough, or being able to have a pathway when there might be some extra barriers that you'll have to break down for someone on your team?
Yeah, I think it'll have to depend on the business leader, whoever's in charge of making those decisions, to figure out where they're going to focus their design thinking time and even their money and budgets potentially for some of this. Do you spend a lot of your time on the hiring side, right, and recruiting the right people? Because potentially, if you do recruit the right people and do what you're saying, which is a model for sure, you fit the culture or you don't. If you don't, there's no chance for hiring you. The culture design then could become really hyper efficient because everyone is thinking in the same way. The question is, are the trends, pointing towards that being more successful, or are they pointing more towards a company that would be more flexible, open, diverse, inclusive, listening to others' perspectives? To be determined, I think. This area of research in culture and culture design is, on the research side, is still kind of budding. Things like mission, core values, vision, they've been around forever.
Mm-hmm.
I think your core values and things like that are meant to be edited just like everything else. As things change, you might bring in the new person that does fit your culture, and they're going to change the dynamic no matter how much you try to control it. I remember a story, and I'll call him Ted, and I will not reveal his real name. And we were working with a company, and they were doing like a team meeting, and like he was sitting in his office. He didn't come out of the office. And one of his managers yelled, "Come on, Ted, we talked about this," in front of everyone, about 20 people in the office. And the rest of us are kind of like, standing around, facilitators, consultants in the room, like, poor Ted. Like, poor Ted, man. He got the talking to, and he got lambasted in front of everyone. It's just like, emotional intelligence is an important quality to have too, right? To know how you're being perceived. Again, there's no perfect combination, but what you're mentioning are other factors. Hiring and firing are important. They're parts of business. Recruiting is important. Recruiting for culture or not for culture. It depends on what your organization is, what your goals are.
And I guess it's about evaluating you talk about editing your values. Mm-hmm. If someone is bringing in something that perhaps should be added, or is pointing out why something needs to be changed, I guess you look at what's coming to that, So if it is, for example, one of your core values is we're always going to be like efficient, but then someone points out like, well, actually, if we take a little extra time and do one last walkthrough through the home, the customer is seeing that that we're detail oriented, and that's getting us more reviews. That's getting us more, social proof out there, because we're not worried about efficient, just getting it done as quickly as possible. Every so often, or in key situations, taking the extra lap around is enhancing that customer experience. Well, that person isn't not fitting in the culture. That person is probably evolving your culture, right?
Right. They probably have a very important voice. And if they're willing to open their mouth and share that voice, you should use your ears and listen. Because you're absolutely right. As whoever's then in charge of how that affects the business itself could be able to measure that. And that's how you measure the effect of culture design, right? If Ted, poor guy, if Ted was out there on a deliverable, he said, what, efficiency? No, like the customers appreciate it, and it leads to repeat business, and it leads to X, Y, and Z. If you're able to point to that measurement, you'll be able to see if that helps or hurts your business over time, right? So if your goal is efficiency, your mission might be different, but your core values can still change. So.
Because full disclosure, Nat, you and I are friends. We've known each other for a while here.
Yeah.
And this question just kind of popped into my mind because I think you'll have a unique perspective on it, because we have similar sort of personalities in this regard.
Yeah.
I don't want to say if you had to choose one, and it's a lighthearted sort of question, but a lot of times people want their core values to be like a mnemonic, like have the acrostic sort of deal. Do you think that that's too almost overblown? Like, the fact that it's called, like, we put lead on the board and it stands for these 4 things, as opposed to like, hey, here are core values. It's not a mnemonic device. It's just 4 things we think are really important. Do you think that it might be a little like, almost, I call it the marketing syndrome of like just trying to find a witty name versus like just having a true understanding of what it is and not worrying about the fact if it's, tangible in that sort of sense? I don't know. I mean, all the time you and I would think of like goofy names or something, or acronyms or something like that. That's what I was like for acronyms.
Sure.
Versus, hey, the message going forward is way more important than how it's packaged.
Yeah. I mean, you could say like, here's our core value culture, whether it's written on the wall or, written nowhere but understood, is blank. Pick the inanimate object. Our culture is a blue kangaroo. Just remember blue kangaroo. That's fine as long as it's okay if in a month it's green, because your people helped you to develop it, right? So I just keep going back to that. And if you're asking me to like put my stake in the ground of, should we write our core values up on the wall, or should we invest that time and whatever money we spent to buy the paint to have 2 more conversations with people and ask them what they think if we were about to write blue kangaroo up on the wall? Do the latter. It becomes more important for interpersonal communication one-on-one, and people get their voices heard, right? Research, and it can't be hokey or ingenuine, but a lot of research from Gallup points to, engagement, and a big piece of engagement is autonomy. People listen to me, right? I feel I have ownership of the job I do and where I work, as opposed to like, I was hired, then they made me sit under the blue kangaroo, and I guess I'm that now.
I can think of all the awkwardness of it, but no, it's interesting to kind of hear that sort of breakdown, because I think a lot of times you are just naturally human nature. It's great if blue kangaroo also could spell out all your values. It's great if you think of the word or it has a little witty sort of thing, but sometimes I think maybe as entrepreneurs, because you're doing so much marketing and you're kind of doing some selling, is you get caught up in thinking that you have to resell it, when it sounds like what you're saying is like, it'll be this organic process, and the design thinking part of it is what's going to make this grow. So how can I tell if it's growing? How is it going to get bigger? How is it going to be able to evolve? Just like any, real ecosystem, like how is this plant going to survive if it's raining, if it's sunny, if it's snowing? All of that, like the design thinking is, okay, what type of garden box do I need to make, or what type of things to put around that? Mm-hmm. And with your culture design, when I first kind of heard, oddly enough, talk about like witty name, like it sounds like, okay, like that's memorable, that's kind of top level there. But itself is also constantly evolving. And I'd love to know if someone's sitting here and they're hearing what you're saying. The one thing, and the reason I wanted to bring you on here was I would personally say that you are an expert in a lot of these topics. But it is very hard to get you to say, here's the definitive answer, because at your core, it's constantly under study. So if someone's looking at you, Nat Measley, looking at your culture design, and they're kind of asking the question of like, all right, well, what are you going to do for me? Like, learn along with me? Like, so what was the inspiration behind your culture design, and what are you looking to accomplish with this new venture?
Yeah, we will help teach you about this system and this process, and we promise to get your people involved so that their voices can be heard. We've had, we've worked with and had conversations with and conducted studies with lots of small to mid-sized companies, larger organizations, national nonprofits. The problems always are kind of the same when it comes to culture. And a lot of people are looking for like, what is the answer, right? Like, what's the thing I can do? The big thing I would recommend is like, spend time just asking your people, and you don't even have to use the guise of what's culture like here. So I've been doing this for 15 years now. So many people, when you ask them to describe their culture, immediately get defensive. And what I mean by that is they will say, our culture, it's great. Our culture's great. Oh my gosh, our culture's so good. Look at all the things we do. Look how happy all the employees are. I mean, look how great our culture is good here. Here, it's good. I believe them as far as, especially if they're in a leadership position, as far as I then get to go talk to a few of their employees, people, and team members and listen and hear. And if they say, oh yeah, Judy's a great leader, that's a different, more genuine answer than, I don't know. Oh yeah, we're forced to do this culture thing and sit under the blue kangaroo on the wall. I don't know. It's interesting. You're right. Like it is an ongoing study. So I think as long as you're willing to understand that it's a complex problem, you can pick off pieces of it to solve. Let's say you have a problem with turnover rates of employees, which in a lot of the home care businesses, with some of the companies we've worked with in the past, employees were switching jobs to the company right across the street because they were paying 5 cents more an hour, right? That's a real problem. And that really happens. Great. Then look at how and ask your people how and why, what would incentivize or motivate them to not make that jump. And if they say, well, I need a car, just listen to them. Because maybe you could get them a car, and maybe it doesn't have to be a car. But it takes a little bit of fearlessness and creativity. But that first basic piece is just your people will tell you. Your people will tell you. If they're willing to share, then they're right for the culture as it exists in that moment. It's a little philosophical, but.
Yeah. And another part is you've talked a lot about, we say like Judy's a good leader, like the leadership doing this. There's also a bit of a trend of like departmentalizing culture. It's our, if you're, a slightly bigger organization, it's our HR person. That's what they do. It's our people and experience, or it's the VP, right? So the owner's there. The owner will come to the picnic, and even if they're buying in, like they're participating, but they're not in the study. Like how many people? You talk about the design thinking with everyone, kind of all the users being a part of it, but does it need to be a set leader or a committee? Like, how do you prevent it from being, that's what that department does, and it's fun, we kind of go along with it, but it's kind of like a sideshow, you know what I mean? It's almost like having a water cooler. Like, it's not my only source of drinking, but it's there and I like it. How do you make sure that you're design thinking and then you making a culture plan? What is the downside or I guess the way I say it's like, why is it important, or if it is important, to make sure it doesn't become departmentalized? That it's not just one person trying to sell everyone else on this. Even if there's leadership support, but not quite involvement. I would love for you to kind of touch on that a bit.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's where I think a lot of the work can start, is on a development of a mission, for the organization, which mission or a vision is something we talk about this in some of the courses that we teach at university. Mission or vision is like the bigger picture driving force of what we're doing. The core values, I think, can be adapted. I've seen companies work with other companies to change their core values. I don't see a problem with the departmentalized culture. Like, if everyone down the hall is doing X and it's working, and it's working for them as a group, and of course, there's some other rules there. It's not against the law. It's not something that's going to get you fired. As long as they have the autonomy, again, they feel they have the job. I don't think there's that big a problem. As long as there are bridges between those departments, I think that's great. In today's world, we're all working like this now too, right? Every day I'm teaching or leading workshops like this with 5 to 10 people in a Zoom call. So it's become even more important. And I can tell you from just some of the groups that I'm a part of, and networks and connections, even the biggest companies, like some names you would know from Silicon Valley in California, I'm on these networking calls with their HR departments and their training and development directors. They are right now, their strategy is take time to make sure we do more one-on-ones and small group connections. So they are compartmentalizing and departmentalizing culture, and that's okay. Culture doesn't have to be something that everyone has to be a part of per se. They can kind of come along as they want.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's always an evolved study. Every time that you and I got a chance to speak, or anytime I see what we're doing, it always seems like there's something new. And I will say, from a personal standpoint, is sometimes it feels a little frustrating that it's almost like a fitness or weight loss or something like that, where I don't know if there's ever going to be one clear, this is how it happens. And I think it's sometimes dangerous thinking to think that there's just one answer out there. And so it's interesting to hear with like your culture design that it's about kind of teaching, the skill set and teaching kind of the mindset of like, well, here's how you become an adaptive person, because that's going to give you the best opportunity for success.
Yeah. And that brings up a great point, right? There's hundreds of really good trainings out there that focus on like one thing, motivation or some piece of culture that makes, and when they work really well is when those trainings are connected or coupled with the organization that needs that at that time. There's hundreds of others out there that people go to the workshop, they put the book on the shelf, it collects dust, nothing happens. And we were talking earlier, Sean, before we got on live, I just had a call this week with a company where that's happened. 12 maintenance, 10 maintenance people and 2 front office staff at a firm just outside of Philadelphia, not far from where I am by day. And their biggest problems are they've tried a lot of these trainings and they just don't work. But I think it's because they weren't aligned or the timing wasn't right. It's important to have a sense and a pulse on what is happening in your culture. So you can pick the right thing.
And it's almost important to keep in mind that it's almost like anything else. Timing, the mood, attitude, what happened prior might happen after. They're all going to have an effect. And maybe it's not always a drastic effect, but there's a great story you have, which we're not going to get to now, but maybe a little bonus content, on the audio only version, things like that. But it's a story I've heard you tell a bunch of times of the culture killer, the person where everything was set up. And they went in and just in one thing, and I see you get intense. If you're watching the video version, you can see Nat start to.
This will be our next podcast: is culture murders. People love murder podcasts.
Yeah, ooh, that's what you should do. True crime culture. You're hearing it here first. Stay on the lookout. Yep. Tony and Nat, we're gonna do the culture killer crime podcast.
We'll need more ominous music at the beginning.
Yeah, no, I think that's the real hook. Is there's not ominous music. It lures you in with nice, happy music, and then killed. Now, regular listeners of the Nice Job podcast will know I've been ending every episode here in season 2 with this same question. And Nat, I want to pose it to you. I'd say everyone on our podcast is an expert in one way or another. You've kind of already touched on this a lot because it's a core of who you are. But give me your best answer on it. Is what do you not know now that you are most excited to find out about? So either it's something that you're going to be working on right now, like, hey, this is what I'm currently trying to get. And it doesn't have to be like, well, I'd love to know the meaning of life. Like, just what is the next thing? Because I feel like sometimes when people listen to experts, they hear all about what they know, but I think it's just as intriguing to find out of like, hey, this is the one thing that's rattling around right now that I want to dive into. So what's one thing you don't know now that you're excited to get the answer to?
This is easy. And one of my good friends, he was the best man at my wedding this past year. We had a COVID safe wedding. We pulled it off. We've had this debate, and the question is, which century will have seen the most change when it's all said and done? 1900 to 2000 or 2000 to 2100? It's a perfect debate because neither of us are probably going to be around to see the end of it. Yeah. So it just goes on. But I don't know what the answer is. And we've debated this many times before, whether it be like socially, economically, geographically, geologically, anything. Will we see more change from 1900 to 2000? Because I won't tell you what side of the argument I'm on, but he and I are on completely different sides of the argument.
Good luck tackling that one. I don't know how it seems like going to the end of that one, but man, yeah, that is, you've now successfully dropped a seed off that flower that's growing in your head. It is now in mine, and I guarantee the next time we talk, that is going to be something that I will be thinking about as well. That's a pretty good one. Nat, I appreciate the time coming on the Nice Job podcast. If someone's listening to this, wants to just see more of what you're doing, or maybe get in touch with you, where should we direct them to? What's the best way to get a hold of Nat Measley?
Yeah, thanks for that. Come find us at yourculturedesign.com. It's as simple as that. A couple of resources on a few of the case studies that we have. So we're happy to hear, even if it's just a free discovery session and you tell us all about what you're going through. We love it.
Awesome, Nat. Well, I appreciate it. We'll chat a little bit after we shut down the record here. But for all of you out there that tuned in today to this Nice Job Live chat, I appreciate you so much. 2021, a new year is upon us. And while it might take a little bit of time for it to actually feel different, there's no day like today to make it different. So you're doing a great first step by listening to podcasts like this. At the very least, whether it's an escape or you're trying to make yourself better, that's all we ask. We'd love for you to drop some comments below wherever you're seeing this. We'd love for you to like it, share it, subscribe. We'd love you to do all that, review it. But at the very least, just take something that you heard today, marinate on it a little bit, and try to put it in your everyday life and see what it does for you. If you're trying to get better every day, that's good on us here. So special thanks once again to my guest, Nat Measley, and to all of you for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Nice Job Podcast. But as always, we hope you're being healthy. We hope you're being safe. And don't forget, it's a little fun out there as well. We will see you next week.